You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
All right, so we're going to get started for the Town of Branford Board of Finance regular meeting, January 27th, 2025. And first on the agenda is to welcome new board member Yvette LaRue, who's been recently appointed, and to fill the vacancy left by Victor Casella. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So with that, we'll move on to the next item. Number 2 is to approve the minutes of the November 25th, 2024 meeting.
I'll move it, Joe. Second.
Moved by Jeff, seconded by Harry. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain, obviously.
Thank you. Item number 3 is citizens' communications. If there is someone from the audience who would like to speak on one of the agenda items, they're welcome to do so now. Tracy, do you want to come up?
Thank you very much.
And just state your name.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Tracy Everson, a Branford taxpayer and a real estate agent. I serve as the Democratic Majority Leader on the Representative Town Meeting, and I represent the 5th District. Thanks to your stewardship, Mr. Chairman, and the work of our longtime Finance Director, Jim Finch, this town is in a strong financial position. Many of us have heard from anxious taxpayers. They're afraid of a huge tax increase this year based on the dramatic increase in the new property assessments that follow the reval. And as we know that our town and school budgets will probably increase due to inflation, police and fire department hires, and initiatives that the new school superintendent is proposing. So taxes are likely to go up, but at this point, no one knows how much. There is a way to lessen the blow. A year ago, we encouraged this board, and you all agreed, to bring forward additional money from the fund balance to help offset last year's tax increase. This year, once again, the Democratic RTM majority is requesting that a portion of the undesignated fund balance, now reported at $56 million, be strategically applied. It's another source of taxpayer money, tax money left over from past budget surpluses. Having a healthy rainy day fund is a good thing, make no mistake. Branford is the envy of many municipalities. Once again, tapping into it strategically at this time is one way to help offset what is expected to be a large jump in taxes this coming fiscal year and in years going forward. We look forward to working collaboratively on the fiscal year 2026 budget. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tracy. Anyone else from the audience like to provide any comments on tonight's agenda? Okay. With none, we'll move on to item number 4, is to consider and if appropriate approve a request from the Board of Police Commissioners for the following transfer for 2025 from GGB Capital Fund Engineering Architectural Fees $20,730 into license plate readers for $20,730. Chief, welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. This was a project that we funded with ARPA, and during the course of speccing that, there was a couple extra site work and location cost increases. And as you know, with the building project, that GGB architectural assessment and building project and needs assessment, there was money there that the finance director was nice enough to point out. So that is the request for that transfer, and I could take questions on that project if anyone has any.
Thank you. Questions?
Does the
Harry?
Is the transfer complete the need? Does the money
Yes.
cover it?
Yep.
Jim, are there additional funds in that after this is taken out of that account?
Yeah, actually, this is sort of a follow-up to the ARPA letter that I had sent to the board back in November. At that time, I had mentioned that the police department would be coming with a transfer to supplement our ARPA dollars. So, and so the chief has had folks look at various locations and intersections and trying to configure what sort of setup he's looking for with the dollars that are available. I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's great, Jim.
Yep.
Other questions from the board or comments?
Move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff.
Second.
Seconded by Pam. Thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, good night, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chief. Take care. Good luck. Item number 5 is to consider and if appropriate approve a transfer request from the Director of Information Technology fiscal 25 year from purchase services, repairs and maintenance, $16,000 into overtime and part-time salaries within the IT department. And it's welcome, Scott. How are you?
Yep. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Scott Smith, the new Director of IT here. I've been here probably a little over a month, but one of the things I noticed right away is that the technology is ramped up in the town, and I think, we need to deal with some short-term needs. We did have some money in the repairs and maintenance account set aside for consulting work. What I'm proposing and requesting here is to split that money into an overtime account to help the 2 existing employees work on project work after hours, and then as well as create a part-time position, probably 3 days a week, but up to 19 hours based upon the town's IT needs, of course. We have several projects going right now. We have the PD project, obviously, which is taking a lot of time to move everybody over to the fire department. We have replacement of all the Wi-Fi in town, installation of computers. We have fixed asset work that has to be done. So there's a lot of things that are pending. So that's why I'm making this request.
Sure. And how many staff do you have? Can you
2.
remind us? 2.
Yep.
2 staff. Questions from Scott, our new IT director?
I'll move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff.
Second.
Second by Deborah. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Next is to discuss MetLife's acquisition of Mesero's fixed income investment business as it relates to the town's pension and coastal resiliency funds. And,
Yep.
Jim, you'd like to handle that?
Yeah. Excuse me, this is just basically, Mr. Chairman, for information purposes. For example, the Board of Finance, here's the quarterly pension reports. So I wanted to inform the board that the fixed income manager, Mesero, is being acquired by MetLife. There isn't any action that the town has to take. If by taking no action, that will transition to MetLife, but the folks at Mesero will still be managing the fixed income portion. And just to give you a little idea of the scale and for Yvette's purposes as well, is that so the fixed income manager is really involved in 3 different funds in the town. There's the other post-employment benefit trust, which provides legacy costs, primarily retiree health benefits. There is the police pension fund, and then there's the coastal resiliency fund. And so all of those funds have a portion of fixed income in there, and the amount is, as of the 4th quarter, for all the fixed income in those investments, was just under $40 million. So they do play a significant role in managing some of the town's assets.
Thanks, Jim. And Jim has provided the information we received from Michael Lepore from our investment advisors with regard to the funds, and also a Q&A from Mesero as to some of the transitional issues, which again we don't see as an issue at all. Is there any questions from the board on this? If not, thanks, Jim.
Yep.
You're all set, Harry?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, is to discuss a letter from the Finance Director concerning the revaluation and tax levy. And we have received a memo from Jim about the reval on the tax levy, and Jim's good fashion has addressed some of the questions and the Q&A approach to it as to, what really is the result of the reval. What does it reflect in a shift at this point in time, which is still to be finalized? What does the shift do to the tax burden, and particularly the residential tax burden? Again, how is the tax levy determined, and should the Board of Finance take any preemptive action or considerations in advance of the budget session? And as Tracy pointed out in her letter to the address to the board tonight, where the board is very cognizant of the financial, its balance sheet, its fund balance, and all the components that go into it. It's not necessarily complicated, but it can be complex at times. There's a lot of balancing that we do from year to year, and we saw this, the issue coming up way back at prior to the last budget session, and took a look at it back in April and May, and knew that there's going to be an impact, and how might we deal with that. Again, we can't control that until we see what the expenditure requests are and what the board does. So again, there's a lot of moving parts. We're well aware of them, and with that, I'll turn it over to Jim, who's got at least some oversight with regards to the estimated grand list and the impact as to what it might do to shift the taxes.
Yeah, well, first I want to also acknowledge Paula Jensen, our assessor, who's in the back as well, who provided the estimates. I know that they're basically finishing up because they'll be filing at the end of this month or February 1st, but as Paula said, they're going to do it on the 31st because of the weekend. And so, these numbers may change, but only slightly. And as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, this is a continuation of what we've been looking at. When we were looking at some of the town's longer-term planning, and we were looking at primarily our public safety needs. As many will recall, we hired 16 EMTs in this last budget. We also wanted to make folks aware that there was a revaluation on the horizon, and we were in a rising real estate environment, and so the charge was to inform both the Board of Finance and the RTM what potential shifts could look like. That initial analysis was admittedly deterministic because we didn't have any information at the time, and I pointed out that as we got closer to having a number, that I would be updating the board in a public manner. And one of the things that this kind of confirms, which we're all aware of, is that there is a significant shift to residential property. So in the letter, there's a spreadsheet which basically shows the value of the grand list in which the fiscal 25 budget was set on, and then the value of the grand list for that we're estimating for next year. And this is, I should underscore, this is prior to any allowance for further appeals. So when it goes to the Board of Assessment Appeals, there may be some adjustments. Typically, there are historically a lot of the high-value properties, islands, etc., typically engage a lawyer to argue the values. And so, but what it does do is it points out some of the shifts. For example, residential real estate was about 57% of the grand list. Now it's about 63% of the grand list. And I've done that for each of the property classes. And then just to kind of show, how is that pie shifting in terms of who's paying the taxes, I used the current levy and just did it in terms of, well, if the revaluation was in place today, and that was the levy, what is the proportional share that each property class would pay? In residential, it's about a $9.4 million shift on residential in terms of tax dollars. And of course, that means other property classes are seeing a shift away in value, and so roughly $2.8 million on the commercial and industrial. Personal property is about 2.4 shift, and motor vehicles is about 4.2. And there's another thing going on there as well with motor vehicles. The current year's motor vehicle grand list was based on the NADA values. The state has changed the way they do it. I don't profess to know the formula. That's probably more Paula's area, but I can tell you it's a formula based on what the original sticker price was. And so I'm not sure what the motivating factor was in Hartford, although I have been told that I think they wanted to make it more in line with what excuse me, what Massachusetts does. So I think that might have been part of the driving force. So I think as we go into this budget season, we do so, as Tracy and you, Joe, and we've just been discussing this for a while, we do so with being painfully aware that the residential components are going to be bearing a greater share of the tax burden. One, if there was no increase in the levy, but clearly there will be some increase in the levy. We also know that we can't control the values. Any sort of, manipulation of values would sort of undermine the whole purpose of a revaluation, right? Which is to make sure that everybody is paying their fair share of the tax burden. So, like many things in life, we sometimes have to look at what is in our locus of control. And so, for a Board of Finance, administration, when I say administration, I'm talking about the town administration, not the school administration. I think that the distinction is worth noting in this budget cycle. And so that thing that can be, that which can be controlled in this case to some extent is the levy. And even within that, and the reason I say to some extent is because there's union contracts, debt service, and other obligations, et cetera. So I think the focus for this budget, not unlike other budgets where we focus on a levy, but because of the various things that we might be looking at, and I've listed some, and some of them will not happen right away, and some of them may take over a year, but clearly these are things we would want to start bringing to the board prior to your receiving your requested budget book in March. And so, and they range from, reducing pension liabilities, and that would reduce future payments. You don't get as big of a bump next year because the town has a pension funding policy in which we fund 90% of the actuarially determined contribution. So we would get like a 10% break on that. So, for example, if the contribution is, let's say in round numbers, $1.7 million, you could save $170,000. And then knowing that in future years when another pension valuation is done, then you'd be able to save some dollars. The other thing is because the town does have a strong fund balance and fund balances in other funds as well, there might be opportunities to sort of back off a little bit when it comes to some of those other insurance and risk. The Board of Education in their presentation had talked about special education. That's a big driver of their budget increase for next year. But they've also identified that they believe that there will be some additional revenue for that, and there seems to be a movement in the state. It was on the front page of today's Register, for example, talking about the need for changing the ECS funding formula and the need to have greater support for special education. Now, a lot of this is framed in the context of the fiscal guardrails, which were put in place during worse economic times, and so the governor seems to be holding firm on that, but like everything else, I suspect that there will be some wiggle room, and hopefully there will be something positive on that end. The other thing is, the Board of Ed is looking to the Board of Finance to allow them to carry over what they're projecting as a $600,000 surplus at the end of the year to be used for their budget. You may recall this was done last year. The superintendent's request was a $475,000. They carried over about $437,000 and ended up being a 4%, which was in line of all of our guardrails and numerous discussions that we've had with the Board of Ed talking about a 4% increase. So there is a change with that. I did mention that they would be coming to the Board of Finance. However, in the last legislative session, the law was changed to basically take a town body out of it. So the Board of Education does not need permission from the Board of Finance, but the superintendent told us privately, and he mentioned it publicly, that nevertheless they want to make that ask to the Board of Finance, and so that might be something we consider in February also. You know, Tracy, you mentioned things projects down the road as well. I mean, you know, we could take a look, as I mentioned before, at some of our, if there's any assets, and I don't want to start any rumors, I mean, but if there are any assets that the town might want to consider selling, any property the town owns isn't on the tax rolls, for example, so if we could put property on the tax rolls and get some dollars for it, that might be something to consider. I know the Board of Ed continues to work on closing out the Walsh Intermediate School project, so depending on how we fare there, and you know, and again, that's also subject to a state audit, but we do anticipate that we would get some money back, and some of that could be used to reduce the amount of debt that we would need to borrow for to complete the financing of the Walsh field project. Non-tax dollars to support debt payments through the Foot Trust. Alex had put his application in before he left, so that might be something in a future year. And as always, work with our delegation. We did have conversations with our legislative delegation in terms of the, you know, when we start looking at a firehouse out east. So we talked about that. Things that we've talked about as recently as I think probably 2, maybe 3 Board of Finance meetings ago, when the fire department was talking about the challenges in terms of replacing the apparatus, right? The supply chain, inflation, fewer companies doing it, and the fact that, you know, we have to sign a contract even though we may not be spending all of the money up front. And so I had mentioned at that might be a good opportunity to supplement some of the pay-as-you-go funding with the bond authorization. So we talked about that. And I think when we look at the fund balance, there's a lot of different tools there. I won't bore everybody with all the things tonight, but, you know, it's almost like you can almost play a game, right? Fund balance as, and then fill in the blank, right? Fund balance as revenue. Fund balance as risk mitigation. You know, to give you a couple, fund balance to reduce future expenditures, right? You know, paying down liabilities to reduce future expenditures. So there's a lot of different things that are out there. I'm not suggesting that there is any kind of magic bullet that takes away the shifts, but I do think that, one, I think it's important that we exercise a variety of options because we do care about the taxpayers, obviously, and also it you know, it helps us in developing the final mill rate. And I think once that final mill rate is known, I think or the recommended mill rate is known, I think it will, it might help put more people at ease. I don't know if they'll necessarily be happy, but, you know, they may understand, and it may not be as bad as they were originally thinking. And, you know, and everybody's different, right? Everybody's property is different. Everybody, you know, lots of people live in different neighborhoods. So I think one of the things that we'd probably do is something I can dust off that I did years ago when we had a revaluation with high property values or a big increase in property values. And that is to look at a sampling of of say maybe 20 properties around town, that might be something to look at. And the other thing too, I mean, I kind of mentioned this when I was talking about the different ways to value motor vehicles, but folks will see a drop off on their on the tax they pay on their cars, so that's something to think about as well. So, but we will have some challenges. I mean, we will be funding again the positions for the fire department, not the 8 firefighters. That'll probably be in a future budget. And I think that I think the Board of Ed budget's going to be a challenge this year. So I know that folks want to support them, and obviously, as quote my retired friend Alex Paluzzi, they're all our kids, right? And he's not here anymore. Okay, and so man, he missed it. So, but anyway, so. I think it's important to, one, is, try to identify the shifts and then try to, start talking about some things, presenting some things in advance of you getting your budget book. And that way we could at least incorporate them into the budget book with the hope that the RTM also acts on them. You mentioned working collaboratively. I think that's where the RTM piece comes in. And there's other things about assigning fund balance and things like that, which, because we always talk about the unassigned fund balance, right? So, and how to assign fund balance. It's not something that we've really done outside of the general fund, but that's something that we could introduce as well as we play that fund balance as game kind of a thing. So anyway, that's it.
All right, so thank you for the explanation and the analysis to date. Questions from the board? So we look forward to this resolving. The grant list is finalized by the end of January. We're on target for that, Paula? Yeah? Okay, that's good. Okay. With no other business to come before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.